disasters in Italian history.
No one had been born in Longarone. There were no official warnings. There were just the warnings coming from the mountain.
October 9th, 1963, in Italy. It's a late night in northern Italy. The villages below the mountains are quiet. People are inside of their homes. Everything is normal. Some are watching football. Some are already preparing to go to sleep. And above them, in the dark, one of the tallest dams on earth, a terrifying, huge concrete structure, is holding back a giant artificial lake. A lot of water, a lot of weight, a monstrosity. But on the side of the mountain, something is wrong. Something is terrifyingly wrong. And a man watching the dam sees the movement. And it's not a small rock fall, not a few stones that we're talking about that are sliding down. A whole section of the mountain appears to be shifting while everyone is basically clueless down in the village. It is shifting above their heads, above their beautiful village in Italy, so they think. So a whole section of the mountain is cracking, and this is the terrifying part. The dam itself is not the weak part yet. The concrete wall is still standing. The danger is coming from the mountain beside the dam, because if that mountainside falls into that reservoir, the lake has nowhere to go. We know this from terrifying fjord tsunamis. We just had one last year at the Tracy Arm in Alaska, a wave 1,680 feet tall. Also, we had the Piave Bay landslide, 1,700 feet tall tsunami. If a mountain falls into a lake or a body of water, the water will be forced upwards. What does that mean for the clueless sleeping people in the village? Because it goes upwards and then it goes outwards and then over the dam. And a man makes a phone call on that fateful night. He reports what he sees. It's dark, it's at night, and he says, I see something. Something's wrong. He asks if people should be worried. The answer he gets is calm. Too calm. Fatefully too calm. He is basically told to stay alert, but everything's great. Go to sleep. Don't worry. But they tell him, but watch carefully if you see something. But down in the valley, people have no idea what is about to happen, how that will change or end their lives forever, how this can turn into Europe's biggest catastrophe ever until this day. They do not know that millions of cubic meters of rock are about to break loose and change everything forever. They do not know that the mountain above the reservoir is already preparing to collapse. And they do not know that within minutes, a wave of water, mud, air, and debris will come down the valley with a force so violent that buildings will be ripped apart, cars will be thrown around, windows and doors will explode inwards, and entire communities will vanish within seconds. This is not the story of a dam that simply broke. This is what makes this disaster so disturbing. The Vajont Dam survived, the wall held, but the people below did not. And it would have been preventable because something very frightening was visible and the warnings were dire. At 10:39 p.m. on October 9th in 1963, a massive landslide tore away from Monte Toc and crashed into the reservoir behind the Vajont Dam. And that tsunami that was created, the impact created a wave so enormous that it shot over the top of the dam and plunged into the valley below. And what happened next became one of the most ending landslide disasters ever recorded in Europe, a man-made disaster, a warning sign disaster, a disaster where the mountain had been speaking for a long time, but not enough people listened. And once the mountain finally moved, there was no time left. This is the story of the Vajont Dam tragedy. Let's have a look at this. You need to know this, guys. Let's start. Dark history exists in many places, and some places choose to forget. Longarone, the village, the town in Italy's northern Dolomites, chooses to remember. And how could it not? The entire town, along with 4 other towns, was destroyed by a man-made disaster. A man-made mega-tsunami that ended over 2,000 people, and 1,400 were from Longarone alone. Longarone is an alpine town roughly 100 kilometers, 70 miles away from Venice in Italy. And it's set between steep mountain peaks. And it is today a memorial to human resilience. Europe's largest landslide catastrophe to date. So what happened? It's beautiful again, it's rebuilt, and it's still facing the mountain that brought disaster. This is a tragedy that is hard to understand, guys, and that's why I think we should talk about this. We all have the pictures of Blatten in mind, but guys, look at this. This is the before picture of a beautiful village in Italy. And then look at the after picture. This is the before picture of a beautiful village in Italy. And then look at the after picture. What you see there is total devastation. And what is so bad about this and makes it different from Blatten, over 2,000 people were lost. They were covered underneath this massive amount of debris and rubble. And what's the worst about it is that it is man-made. And that's why I want to talk to you about this, because something like this could happen again. And I've reported about many videos where we have volcanic eruption, where we have earthquakes that are threatening things that could cause something like this. In Ethiopia, for example, we'll talk about this. So trust me, you will want to know what happened on this tragic day on 1963. October 9th, 1963, to be precise, in Italy, when we're talking about 260 million cubic meters of rock that broke off from the top of Monte Toc. That is a mountain there that's on the border between Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia. And okay, why do I say this is man-made? They didn't use explosive to blow that top off. Remember, Blatten, I have to bring this comparison. The mountain top broke off and fell on the glacier. The glacier couldn't hold this anymore. It was so much weight, it broke off and everything was crashing down together. But here, it was not a glacier. It was something man-made. It fell into the reservoir lake of the Vajont Dam. I think you can now imagine what I will tell you next. And that has produced a gigantic, and now guess, do you want to say rockfall, mountain collapse, dam collapse? No, a tsunami. It's like a mountain tsunami. 50 million cubic meters of water. But let's jump back in time a little bit, because that was foreseeable. And there were warnings about this. Steep, rugged mountains. That's the geology in this area. And it's in northern Italy. You see, it's almost at the border. The regions are called Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia. Sounds really beautiful. Romeo and Juliet, Julia. But this is a tragedy. How can I say, guys? A size that is really shocking. Really, really shocking. And we can say human hubris plays a big role in this bad engineering and probably environmental risk as well. And all that summarized is the story of the Vajont Dam. And it's a landslide that should have been expected and kind of was expected by some. And until today, I'll show you that as well. You can see the scars of that catastrophe. Well, remember, you're being in that village, you're in your home, your four walls, where you feel safe, where you feel protected, your sanctuary. And all of a sudden, without warning, you don't know what's coming. You hear that rumbling sound like thunder, and then it's already too late. Absolute tragedy. Why did they build a dam there? You might now ask, and you're absolutely right that you ask that, because that was my first thought as well. Absolutely crazy. And that goes back to the early 20th century, the idea to build a dam there, when engineers and planners kind of saw this steep gorge in that area that was carved by the Vajont River. That's why Vajont Dam, that is beneath Monte Toc. And they thought that this is a very promising site to generate energy for a hydroelectric project, because the slope is steep, perfect. By the 1950s, after the war, Italy kind of was rebuilding, it was growing, it was modernizing everything. Their demand of electricity was growing rapidly. So great appetite for power, and that resulted in, I don't know, how do we want to call it, audacious or ambitious infrastructure. That's how I would call it. They designed these dams. They decided, let's do it. The designer of that dam, his name was Carlo Semenza, and it was built by a company that was called SADE. Later, the company name was Enel. And they started construction pretty quickly after their planning and design process was finished. In 1957, they started the construction, and they were fast. Basically, 2 years later, by 1959, it was more or less already completed. And this is quite a big thing. So that was 262 meters tall. That is 860 feet. And this was like a curved, or they also call this arch dam. And for that time, this was one of the tallest arch dams in the world at the time. So this is what an ambitious project that was. And they built it in only 2 years. That makes me already a little bit suspicious. But of course, the location. And crazy enough, there were early warning signs. But I guess once you decided for that project, you poured a lot of money in it, well, you want to start it no matter what. Because already during construction, there were warning signs and very worrisome signs. So not just a little piece of gravel coming down the slope that might they were cracks, they were shifts, they were minor landslides at Mount Toc. So the mountain was kind of saying, hey guys, can I make a proposition? Just don't do that. And the locals already called that mountain the Walking Mountain for some reason. The Walking Mountain, if you watch my channel, guys, you probably know what that means, because I'm reporting about these landslides quite a bit. So if something's called a Walking Mountain, not good, right? So, or if something's called Snake River. I've recently been on a river like this, and yeah, there's a lot of rattlesnakes. So it has a name for a reason. I'm reporting a lot about Campi Flegrei, the burning fields Also makes sense because that's a 100-kilometer spanning supervolcano consisting of several craters and calderas. So the walking mountain, scientists and geologists were raising red flags, big red flags at the time. They said that the mountain is unstable, and it was unstable. There were layers of clay and rock mix that could slip. And clay, if that gets wet, for example, with heavy rainfall, oh my gosh, that can act like a lubricant for all these rocks. So when the water levels rose, things could get dangerous. And they did. But despite this, they filled up this reservoir. They filled it up gradually, and already in 1960, there were a few smaller landslides or slides. And then in the next few years, it became apparent that how the locals called it, the moving mountain, was indeed moving. What a surprise. So the company that owned the dam and was operating the dam, they tried to mitigate the risk. They thought, okay, come on, let's lower the water levels. There's less risk, there's less pressure. They also built tunnels to relieve the pressure. They're called galleries. But all these measures, unfortunately, were insufficient. And the people living in the area, they felt uneasy. They didn't really like that. But electricity, gold, like at that time, everyone needed it, right? So I guess that's why they took the risks. Until one night on October 9th in 1963, in the darkness, unfortunately, local time 10:39 p.m., everything came to a halt. Halt is maybe the wrong description. Everything ended. Because this was not a halt. This was a massive, massive avalanche. About 260 million cubic meters of rock broke loose from the mountaintop, from Mount Toc, and then they plunged into the reservoir. And we've seen this. We just had a landslide that created a monstrosity of a tsunami, over 1,500 to 1,700 feet in Alaska. Tracy Arm landslide. There's one landslide, impending Barry Arm landslide. The videos are on the end screen, or check the videos on my channel, that have displaced water in Norway if a mountain crashes into water. And that's what happened here. The mountain crashed into that reservoir. It's like a bathtub. If you plunge into your bathtub, geez, that creates a tsunami, and it goes over the edge of your bathtub. And as you can imagine, this massive amount of rock and debris plunged, as the slopes are so steep, with high speed. High speed and power were also a factor. It plunged into that reservoir, and that, of course, magnified the mountain tsunami. The mountain tsunami. And it has displaced water at unimaginable speed and force. So the estimates are that this has created a colossal wave of about 50 million cubic meters of water that surged over the dam in a colossal wave. And the dam wasn't even full. Had it been full, well, the outcome was full destruction anyway, so I don't know. Crazy enough, the dam remained nearly intact, so it wasn't breaking, thank God. It wasn't breaking and sending all the water from the reservoir down the slope in addition. It was kind of, I have to say, one of the remarkable things about this mountain tsunami and about this tragedy, that the dam was holding. But the problem is, this overtopping wave, I call it mountain tsunami. Scientists, it's not a scientific description, but I think it really describes what was happening. Has destroyed the villages downstream. And when you see the picture, there were multi-story apartment homes. So way more populated than Blutten, which evacuated in time, thankfully. So we're talking about thousands of people. And Longarone, That was the biggest town in the path of this tsunami, was absolutely devastated. And you have to imagine that they lost nearly a third of their population. So in total, almost 2,000 people. 2,000 people in a few seconds. So their safe homes turned to ruins, and not even that, because they were not even visible anymore. They were just covered. So in a matter of seconds and minutes, that the life of people and that valley has changed forever. And you can imagine that in the wake of this disaster, this had definitely also a fallout, especially a political fallout, and accusations were flowing around, as you can imagine, by people that were left and that were surviving this, and family members of the people lost. And the questions did rise. Was this purely a natural catastrophe, or were engineers, authorities, and companies that owned this and operated this responsible for ignoring the warnings that were definitely there? Because at the time when it happened until now also, many historians, local scientists and geologists, and also local residents, they immediately argued that there was enough knowledge beforehand to see this coming, and I agree with them. But on the other hand, okay, they knew the risks, but they also had faith in the technical expertise of the designers and the experts that designed and created that dam, like the developers, and the caution that they might have had, even the developers and engineers, that basically was overturned by political pressure and especially economic priorities. They needed electricity and they needed it fast. So after the disaster, legal proceedings were undertaken, and many consider until today the punishments way too light. And until today, the debate about responsibility has never died down. So what's there today? What's the status? What remains of Vajont? And how is it remembered? The dam is still there. It still stands. You can see this concrete arch wall. And although it was overtopped, it still looks remarkably intact. There is no full reservoir of water behind it right now. And the landslide debris has basically filled up everything what was left of the lake, right? All these rocks and the debris has filled up the reservoir, has displaced the water and has filled it up. So now the site has become a place of memory. And visitors have access to the site. They can walk along the top of the dam in guided tours, not by themselves as it seems, and they can see the remnants of the destroyed villages. And there's also a small visitor center, so the scars are still there. Longarone, the town that was hit by this disaster the most, was rebuilt after this disaster. And they built a cemetery for the victims that was completed by in the early 1970s, and then refined over the later decades. And it holds almost 2,000 white markers that in Italian they call them cippi. And each marker has the name, one name of one victim on it. No matter whether their remains were directly recovered or not, because they were not able to recover them. And you can imagine that in a memorial like this is until today deeply felt in the community, and many people that live there today have lost relatives in this disaster. But there were other villages that were even higher up that have suffered badly from this disaster. For example, the villages of Erto and Casso. The village of Erto was particularly impacted heavily by this tsunami, and today we can say it's partly symbolic for that disaster. It's a historic area, and it was declared a national monument even in 1975, and the efforts that they make until now is to preserve the buildings and the memory and the identity of that village. And some people returned, but many did not. And then you see the crater. That is basically a dry bed of what would have been the reservoir. And you can still see where that massive landslide coming from the top of the mountain started to rest, was basically the final place. You can still see all that rock debris. And of course, over time, vegetation starts to grow on it, has basically recolonized many areas and is covering up these scars a little bit. But if you look at the topography of this area, that has forever changed. So the deep canyon behind the dam is also largely filled with that debris. Every anniversary of that disaster is marked and remembered. There's lots of books about it, there's plays about it, there's movies about it, there's documentaries about it. And even UNESCO has cited this Vajont dam disaster / tsunami as a tale of caution, I would say, in several contexts, especially when it comes to discussions about geology, engineering, ethics, and also environmental policy when there's new projects that might be planned. This disaster is then, how can I say, they put it out of the basement and say, here, this is what happened, so be cautious. Do you want something like this to happen again? So of course, I hope that we have evolved since then, understanding the land projects are built on a little bit better, the slopes, the fault lines, soil layers, old landslides. But still, I mean, I'm reporting about this. There's many areas that are built on a fault line. I've reported about the creeping fault in California that is cutting sidewalks and homes in half. So until today, things like this happen, that people build infrastructure right on something dangerous. And I mean, I'm not even talking about Campi Flegrei, guys. If you watch my channel on a regular basis, you know what I mean. This is the highest densely populated supervolcano in the world. And hopefully that these days with modern technologies, we hopefully take the warning signs more serious. But I also have to bring Campi Flegrei as an example. Do they really take them as serious as they should? Because again, economic factors come into play, tourism, property values, investments, all that stuff. I just made a video about Santorini. You should watch that. There was another 4.4 in the area where the earthquake swarm was, but the official version on the tourist booking site is like, that wasn't even magmatic, don't worry, and all is good. It was magmatic. So this is kind of strange. And I think memorizing disasters like this is the one thing. But also, a big part of how you remember this tragedy, especially when so many lives were lost, is honor them by making sure something like this will never, ever happen again. That such mistakes are being remembered. I hope, guys, this was interesting for you. If it was, please leave this video a like, click the hype button. If you want to fill me up with coffee to keep me going, like these Duracell batteries, they once had a commercial like this. Fill me up with coffee, guys. Check the links in the description of this video underneath the video player. buymeacoffee.com/silky. Thank you for your supers. Thank you for being members. Click the join button for behind the scene videos. And I hope I see you somewhere in a second if you click the end screen. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.